Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Neye Ojirada, Medinde Ojirafo, Kwesi Radnehem Pata Akan. South Amaruka is Tipimu Ojirafo. That means greeting to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Ojira Day. My name is Ojirafo, Kwesi Radnehem Pata Akan. Ojirafo of the Aquamu Nation in North America. Yerase, we thank you once again for tuning in. We are attempting to open up the chat room, and we're going to be placing links in the chat room to the different publications that we will be addressing. Okay, so the chat room is open. If you have a question or a comment in the chat room, you have to log in with a username in the chat room. You can't comment as a guest. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for one very quickly in Blog Talk. And then also on the phone line, if you have a question or a comment, just hit the number 1, and we can see that your hand is raised, and then we can connect with you in that fashion. So we're just putting up some of the links right now. The Adebisa page, which is the introductory piece on the Adebisa page, is also in the form of a PDF document, so either way you can download it directly from the page, or you can read it as a PDF. And then we have a couple of other documents here that we're putting up. Okay, and so what we're going to have is, for the individuals who are new, we have 3 shows on a weekly basis. We have Akan Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joada on Mondays. We're in the midst of a multi-part series dealing with the abosom, the forces in nature that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the Akan 7-day week. So we're in the midst of that series. We did part 8 yesterday. We'll be dealing with part 9 next week. So the various abosom, awusi, ajua, bena, abena, awuku, akua, yao, ya, aba, afi, and ameme, which is osar and offset, and heru behudet, and sekmet, and set, and nebethet, and heru, wachet, nekabet, het heru, and ameme, and ancient kemet, the same divinities. We're dealing with those on a weekly basis. These are the forces in nature that govern Kra, or Krawa, the soul, the divine consciousness of the Akan individual based on their assignment, pre-incarnation, and of course we are born on their day as an indicator of who we were assigned to pre-incarnation. So we're in the midst of that series on Monday. On Wednesdays, Awukuda, Wednesdays, Akwada is our show, Egua Marketplace, where we showcase Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions. Those who are serving the community in a positive capacity, but also sharing our ancestral values in the process. And we bring people on, talk about their businesses, organizations, institutions, and their philosophy behind their approach to serving the community. We are also, in that regard, in the midst of our 52-week project operation, which is the Akan economic model. When you go to our Akan page, and I'll put that link in the chat room right now, if you're on the phone line, when you go to ojirafo.com, ODWIRA, F as in free, O.com. When you go to ojirafo.com, our flagship website, when you go to the Okom page, OKOM, then when you go to that page, you'll see our Okom economic development model. You can click on the front cover of that publication. You can download the publication and read that to study what the model is. We're starving the beast to feed the pride. We starve the beast by taking the funds that we waste on a weekly basis with the whites and their offspring, with that white beast. We starve the beast of those resources, take those resources and reallocate them to an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit organizations, businesses, institutions. We are targeting one business per week for the next 52 weeks. This week is week number 3. The first week, which was February 1st through the 7th, we asked everyone to support Nkingu Health, owned by Dr. Afibi Adiro, who's a naturopathic doctor, and she informed us she received a number of inquiries on the website and received a number of donations and support for her business. So we appreciate everyone who contributed. So hers was the first week. The second week, September 8th through the 14th, was our Akongwasuya Dine institution, and we had a number of individuals contact us, check out the information. Some people made purchases of the book, as well as donations to support the institution. So Yedase, we thank you for that. This week, which started on September 15th and will go through February 15th, going through February 21st of the week, is Wahimi Mmusuo Productions, Cultural Rebirth Connections, owned by Dr. Iya Ajua. So please support that business this week. Starve the beast and feed the pride. Starve the white beast instead of wasting money on trivial things at gas stations and convenience stores and things like that. Products that you really don't need. You make that assessment on a weekly basis. Starve the beast of those resources and reallocate them to an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business. This week is Wahimi Mmusuo Productions. So when you go to the Akan page, you'll see the Akan Economic Development Model. You can download that, read that. We have parts 1, 2, and 3 of our Blog Talk series where we went into detail about the Akan model in part 1 as well as part 2 and 3. You can watch those videos to get greater insight into the information and the nature of the economic model, development model. And then we also have links to all of the businesses that we will be targeting on a weekly basis, links to the business, their websites, as well as links to the interview that we did with them on Egua Marketplace. We have 14 laid out on the site now, and we're going to continue to add more businesses on a weekly basis, and sometimes even more frequently than that, until we get to that number 52. So we will have tangibly supported 52 Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions over the course of 52 weeks. So we're not just talking about support black business, we are directly targeting specific businesses, organizations, and institutions on a weekly basis. Starve the beast and feed the pride. So this is what we're doing on Awukuda Wednesday, dealing with the Egua Marketplace show. All of the archives of all of our shows, remember you can always go to the Blog Talk Radio channel. We have 95 shows at this point, archived. You can go, most of them, they range between 2 and 3 hours. You can download all of them at any time, blogtalkradio.com/Ojidafo. We have created videos for some of them, and so the ones that we have done that, we've posted them on our YouTube page. So you can go to our YouTube page. We are Ojidafo on YouTube, and you can download those videos as well as others. We have like about 82 videos on our Ojidafo page where we examine, in our videos, we examine our publications. We have 16 books presently, more to come very soon. And then we also have over 60 articles that we've published. So in our videos, we examine the books in detail, examine the articles in detail, as well as we bring forth new information that has not yet been published but will be published in the very near future. So we're not just talking about things, we're actually examining the work. So when people study the books, study the articles, and so forth, they can also reference the video where we go into detail about the book. So, for example, our book, More Means Dead, where we show etymologically and cosmologically for the first time that anybody has done this, given the proper definition of the term more and showing that from ancient Khanit and Kemet all the way to the present, proving etymologically and cosmologically that more means dead. And, of course, it's a foolish title to refer to yourself as. Only people who've been brainwashed by the whites and their offspring utilize that foolish title. So we go into detail to prove that in the book. But then we have a video where we spend about 2.5 hours going through the book point by point to bring clarification to all of the information in the book. The same is true. We just released our book a few weeks ago, Hoodoo People, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in America, Akan Custodians of Ancient Hoodoo from ancient Hoodoo or Udunu land, which is Khanit, Nubia. So we go into detail proving that the term Hoodoo is, number one, an Akan term, dealing with medicine, also dealing with root work, conjuring, and so forth. It is the Akan tradition brought to North America by Akan people. We continue to call it Hoodoo, just like we call it in Ghana, Ivory Coast. But we also trace the term back to Hoodoo or Undu, meaning medicine, also meaning conjure, in ancient Khanit, ancient Nubia. In fact, one of the titles of ancient Nubia was the Udunu land, and the people called the Udunu people. When we talk about Undu or Udunu, we're talking about the people, the land, and the ritual practice. We carried it to West Afuraka, Afuraitkait, continue to call medicine Undu or Unduru, and people Oduyefo, Odun Sinifo, the root workers, root doctors, conjurers, and so forth, and will be forced to migrate to North America during the Mmusuo Kese, the Great Perversity and the Enslavement era. We continue to call the tradition Hoodoo, and we continue to call the practitioners, the ritual specialists, root workers, root doctors, and conjurers, and so forth. So that is the Akan tradition. So we have the book we published, but then we also did a video, a broadcast, 2.5-hour broadcast, where we go point by point through the entire book to clarify the various aspects of the information that we cover. So this is what our broadcast, our videos are designed to do, to bring further clarification to what we have published, as well as to bring new information that we will be publishing that we have not yet committed to writing yet. But we are in the process of writing, but instead of waiting for the information to come out, we went ahead and broadcast and put the information out, and then you'll have a publication coming very soon. So everything that we put out, we want to give further clarification in written format, audio format, visual format, and so forth. So follow us on YouTube, OG.fo on YouTube, OG.fo as well on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. And we are Afuraka on Instagram and Afuraka.Afuraitkai on Facebook. And we have an Akan Nanasom group on Facebook. Also like to put real quick, our social network, our private social network, Afuraka-Afuraitkai.ning.com. So it's a private social network on the Ning platform, very similar to Facebook, but it's something private that we own, that we pay for. We need to have things outside of Facebook so we're not totally dependent on, the whites and their offspring, and they can come in and shut down your group or your page whenever they feel like it. They force people to change their names on Facebook. They shut down Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit groups, the Afrocentric groups, because they talk too much about race as far as the Ashiwadi pose of spirits of disorder are concerned. So we need to have things outside of that platform. So we have our own social network. You can join that. And we post discussions, blogs, videos. People share information. Our people from around the world studying and sharing information about Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, Ancestral Religion, and various other topics, nation building, and culture. So check that out. All right. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to go to the first link that we posted in the chat room. And for the individuals who just came on, if you have a question or comment, hit the number 1. If you're on the phone line, in the chat room, you must log in if you want to engage in the chat room with a username. If you don't have one, you can create one very quickly. So on Abinada, we have Tuesdays, we have Ojida, which means purification. the Akan language, Jida means to purify. Ojida means purification. That's the noun form. It also is the title of the New Year's celebration for many Akanfo. Ojida, purification, which is the process we go through at the end of one cycle, the end of the year, the beginning of the new cycle. The New Year's celebration for many Akanfo is around August, September, October. The date shifts based on the agricultural cycle. For those who have not been brainwashed and moved the celebration up to January 1st, which is the Pseudo New Year of the whites and their offspring, where everything is dead, dark, and cold. Then they say Happy New Year. That's a white glacial era, caveman type celebration, which is nonsensical. But for us, at the end of one cycle, the end of the warm cycle, the harvest time, but the harvest time is also the time to plant seeds, the seeding time. So that happens for us around September. So in South Amaruka, the Akwamu Nation in North America, we celebrate our 7-day Ojida celebration observance in September, calibrated to the Atem and Atemet, the autumn equinox. So the first full day of the equinox is the first day of our new year, which for us this year was September 22nd. So that was the first day of our new year of 13,015. Of course, we're in the midst of a 26,000-year astronomical cycle. Of course, we do not track time based on a fictional cartoon character, Jesus, who never existed, nor do we calculate time based on a fictional cartoon character, Muhammad, or any fictional character in the Bible, Quran, Talmud, or any pseudo-religion. So we go into detail about that in the Kukutumsum, the ancestral jurisdiction. So Ojida means purification, but it also means a celebration of purification. When we look in the language of ancient Khanit and Kemet, Nubia, and Egypt, we will find that Jida means purification. See that in the Mendut, the hieroglyph. It also means a celebration of purification. So it is the same term because we speak the same language with the same people who migrated from those regions, migrated west, reestablished civilization in the ancient empire of Akana and Ghana after we migrated from ancient Khanit, Nubia. Once we moved from the ancient empire of Ghana, we moved to the forest belt where Ivory Coast and Ghana is now. And then some of us were taken from there and forced into North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the enslavement era, the Mmusuo Kese. So the same people, same culture, worshiping the same divinities, speaking the same language, operating in the same fashion with the same ancestresses and ancestors who have returned. So this is why the terms, of course, are the same term. We always talk about how Ojida, or purification, operationalizes Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, which is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. No matter what expression ancestral religion takes, the term we use, Nanasom, for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, meaning African ancestral religion, is through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order every moment of every day. And through ritual, we restore balance to our lives. We reject, repel, hate, expel those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to maintain balance in our lives, to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. So the expansive and contractive pose of ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That is ancestral religion in its essence. And purification, Jida, operationalizes Nanasom, operationalizes Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. So we need to purify our thoughts, intentions, and actions, our culture, philosophy, intellect, and so forth, ritual practices, so we can move forward in a harmonious fashion. It operationalizes our practice. We try to become impure. We become impure and try to move forward and engage ancestral religion in an impure fashion, trying to bring lust and malice and idiocy to our practice. You don't have an ancestral religious practice. Purification operationalizes our practice. So there's no compromise with that. When you have the intent to engage in a harmonious fashion, then you receive support from the abosom and Nanasom, the deities and spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, because they are directed to assist us by Nyame wa Nyame, the great mother and the great father of the Supreme Being. If you don't have that pure intent, we're not talking about you have to be perfect, but the intent, the real intent, genuine intent to align yourself with order, then you receive that kind of assistance because you're aligning with those forces in creation that are the embodiments for it. If you don't have that pure intent, you think you can just embrace ancestral religion with a foul, perverse intent, you receive no assistance, no direction, no empowerment from the abosom, the Enslavement, or the Supreme Being. You're just a criminal going through the motion. So we're going to get into that. So that's the nature of the show for ODWIRA. So let's get into our topic, Adebisa, divination, and also specifically with regard to Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in America. So we're going to go through, when you go to our Adebisa page, the introductory text on the page is also in the form, we made it into the form of a PDF document, and in fact, I'll put that link in the chat room as well. So you can read it directly from the page, or you can download the PDF document and read it that way. And we want to go through this information and bring clarity to some points, as well as talking about related information, related articles that are mentioned in the context of this introduction to Adebisa. So this page is talking about Adebisa in general, but it's also talking about ODWIRA Adebisa, which is the major form of Adebisa or divination used within South Amaruka, the Akwamu nation in North America. We're not going to focus on ODWIRA Adebisa tonight, our specific major form of divination that we utilize in the Akwamu nation and Akwamu mind. We're going to talk about Adebisa in general. So, divination or spiritual consultation is an integral component of all expressions of Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religion. And of course, for people who are new, we have our book, Afuraka, Afuraitkait, the origin of the term Africa, where we prove conclusively that that term comes directly from our ancient ancestresses and ancestors, and we show it in the hieroglyphs of ancient Khanit, in the papyrus of Ani, for example, the papyrus of Hunefer, as well as the temple of Set in Paraka and so forth, showing that Afuraka and Afuraitkait, the male and female forms of that original title, deals with the first landmass created by Ra and Ra'ed, the creator and creatress of the universe, called Nyonkumpon and Nyonkunton in the Akan tradition. All right, so divination, spiritual consultation, is an integral component of all expressions of Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion. Wherever Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Africans, black people are found in the world. This includes Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in North, Central, and South Amaruka, America, in the Caribbean, and the Caribbean today, who are descendants of those who were taken from Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, during the Mmusuo Kese, the great perversity, the enslavement era, yet we survived, waged war against the whites and their offspring, the white slavers, and liberated ourselves. And we're going to get into that when we talk about Hoodoo in North America. In our common culture, the term bisa is a verb. It means to inquire, to consult, to ask, and so forth, to query. Adebisa is the noun meaning inquiry. The phrase Adebisa, to go, call, ask, inquire, consult. Bisa is a phrase typically used when describing the act of someone going to ask, inquire, or consult the abosom and Nananom and Samanfo, the deities, divine spirit forces in creation, and the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. So, for example, in our common culture, if there's a tribunal, elders and eldresses, the Nananom Mpanyimpo, in connection with the community, they're trying to make a decision about a certain important endeavor. legislation or various things that are going on in the community, if they're typically ruled by consensus, but if it gets to a point, which is rare, that no consensus can be reached, then the Nanasom, the spiritually cultivated elders and eldresses will say, Metko, Bisa, we are going to ask. And what they're talking about is they're going to go and ask Abrewa, Yeko Bisa Abrewa. We are going to ask Abrewa. On one hand, we're talking about Asase Afua, the Earth Mother, and she's part of that process. But Aberewa, the old woman, the elder, ancient woman, the great mother, talking about specifically when you're dealing with divination, talking about Aberewa, the ancient mother, the one dealing with divine wisdom. She is called Aberewa in Akan. She's called Deshat in ancient Kemet, the divine scribe, the divine female divinity of wisdom, the wife of Tehuti, who's the male divinity of wisdom, and he's the husband of Seshat. So you have Tehuti, who is also called Sesh, the scribe, and you have Seshat, the great divine female abosom of wisdom. She is called Fa. When you talk about Vodun, you're talking about Fa, and Tehuti is also called Fa in Vodun. And then you'll find, of course, Ifa in the Yoruba tradition, Afa in Igbo, Fa in Vodun, all variations of the same divine wisdom oracle. In Igbo, for example, they will talk about the origin of Afa. And they'll say the origin of Afa was there was a woman who had the ability to see the past, present, and future. And people used to consult her on a regular basis. When she made her transition, the world went into chaos. So the people went with a delegation, and they went to Chukwu and Komosu, the great father and the great mother, the supreme being in the spiritual realm, the heavenly realm, and said, listen, we need the world's in chaos because she made her transition. She was able to tell us things to keep order in society. We need something in place of that. And then Chukwu gave the people Afa, the wisdom oracle, rooted in, which is the representation of that connection with that divine female, divine mother who could see the past, present, and future. So this is really talking about Seshat, talking about Aberewa and Akan and so forth. Aberewa is the old woman, the one who can see past, present, and future. So the Nananom Anyifo, even in civil, disputes and so forth, if things do not reach consensus, then the Nananom Anyifo, the honorable elders and eldresses, will leave the venue, go out and consult with Aberewa, with Seshat, the great female abosom of divine wisdom. She's called Aberewa Nakan, and in Bre Chirikunuate, the omniscient one is the title for Tehuti. We did a broadcast, and we went into detail about Tehuti and Seshat. And they are different, again, from Ma'al and Ma'at, who codified the divine law. So Tehuti and Seshat, the male and female forces of divine wisdom, the mouthpiece, male and female, of Aminet, Amen, Nyamewa, Nyamen. Ma'al and Ma'at codify the law as expressed by Tehuti and Seshat. So those are two different divinities, male and female. And we did a prior broadcast on Ma'al and Ma'at, the male divinity Ma'al, the female divinity Ma'at. So that whole notion of Yekobisa, Abrewa, we are going to add Abrewa, the great mother of divine wisdom, so we can find out what we need to know to bring balance to these situations. This is part of the living culture and has always been part of that. All right. So the term Ade or Adie, thing, object, or entity, the term Adebisa, therefore means things, Ade, that are asked, inquired, or consulted about. Bisa. Adebisa is thus an Akan term for spiritual consultation or divination, a major feature of Akan Nanasom, ancient authentic Akan ancestral religion. But of course, the same concept exists across the board wherever Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people are in the world. Through Adebisa, through divination, one learns from the abosom and Nanasom and Samanfro, from the Orisha and Egungun, from the Vodou and Kuvita, the deities and honored, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, the nature of past, present, and potential future circumstances and events in relation to our thoughts, intentions, and actions as measured against the standard of Nyame wa Nyame Nsheshe, which is the Supreme Being's order, the divine order. Adebisa operationalizes Nanasom, just as we said earlier. ODWIRA, Purification, operationalizes Nanasom. Well, Adebisa is a means by which we achieve purification, and therefore Adebisa operationalizes Nanasom. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion. It is not just about seeking answers to overcome obstacles and exigencies, urgent requirements, which it is that. But we also use Adebisa to learn. Just as one can sit down and open up a book or log on to the internet to learn facts about various subjects to study, so do we use Adebisa to learn about, research, and study any subject imaginable. The abosom and Nananom and Samanfo, in concert with your Okra, your soul divine consciousness, will inform, direct, and position you to come into contact with individuals and information concerning the subject you queried about for confirmation and further study. Oracular divination systems of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, Africa are the original books that we opened and continue to open in order to avail ourselves of the knowledge of all things in the physical world and the spirit realm. So when we talk about that, when we talk about the origin of divination, you have different stories. It's like the one in Igbo talking about the woman making her transition, and she went up to the heavenly realm, and they wanted her to still communicate. They talk about Fa in Vodun and Badu sitting on top of the tree that is called Fa, and Badu has 16 eyes, and Legba opens up the eyes and closes the eyes, and determined by Badu, and she determines, gives her prognosis of whatever situation is being queried about. In Akan tradition, Abrewa, the old woman, is the one who provides that divine wisdom and so forth. When we're talking about oracular divination and how it comes about, and when we say we learn divination from the abosom, that means we literally learn divination from the abosom. Just like we said previously, when we say we learn from Tahuti and Seshat how to write the Medusa, they taught us the reading and writing of the sacred symbols. That is a literal statement. So when you have Negroes who have, embraced the whites in their offspring, are enamored with pseudo intellectuosity and so forth, and they believe that they're actually cracking the codes of, ancient culture by studying the whites and their offspring's work on ancient Kemet and things like that. They have no real understanding of what's taking place, so they will gloss everything that our ancestresses and ancestors have said and continue to say with regard to the origin of our ritual practices, our cultural practices, and so forth. When we say that the abosom taught us divination, we mean the abosom taught us divination. Akom, or spirit possession, takes place. The abosom possess, and then through the body of the individual, they will move and grab a stick and draw symbols in the sand, symbols in the dirt, point to the symbol, and enunciate the sound represented by the symbol, and then direct you to repeat that sound and replicate that enunciation. And once you do that, then you know that symbol has this particular sound and what it represents. And they would draw the various sounds. People who are actually engaged in real ancestral religious practices today, they understand that that still happens today. The abosom, as well as the Nananom and Samanfo, very often will reach for something to write in possession, or they outside will grab a stick and draw symbols in the dirt in the process of being possessed or possessing the individual. So that's common knowledge amongst people who actually practice the tradition. But when you have pseudo scholars thinking that they're talking about the culture and thinking they're cracking the code into the arcanum of the ancient Egyptian sacred societies and mysteries, all that nonsense, they're proving to you they have no knowledge of what's happening. When they try to gloss over and take agency away from the abosom, and whatever we say the abosom have taught us, they say, oh, well, that's not really what was happening. What they were really trying to say was this, and they give some foolish explanation. You know, you're dealing with Negroes, no matter how Afrocentric they claim to be, they have no knowledge whatsoever of the culture. You also have Negroes entering into pseudo-practices of Vodun, pseudo-practices of the Yoruba tradition, Ifa, Orisha, pseudo-practices of the Akan tradition, pseudo-Dogon practices, and so forth, and they will claim these various practices. They'll make up different kinds of quote-unquote Kemetic traditions and priesthoods and priestesses and so forth, and they will claim that they're practicing ancient tradition. But in reality, that is just an external garment or vestment. But what's really happening is they're studying pseudo-metaphysics, studying pseudo-esoteric nonsense from the white snare offspring, trying to blacken that foolishness up and then recast it as ancient tradition. And they will bring that foolishness into Ifa, they'll bring that foolishness into the Akan tradition, they'll bring that foolishness into Vodou, they'll bring that foolishness into Kemet, and start mixing all kind of foolish white pseudo-philosophies into these traditions. They'll start trying to say that the deities are just deified ancestors. The deities are just anthropomorphic representations of Ashe or spiritual energy, and we just came up with these stories just to teach lessons. That's when you know Negroes have no knowledge of what they're talking about at all. If you're dealing with actual abosom, actual Orisha, actual Vodou, then you can ask the individual from your interaction with the Vodou, with the abosom, with the Orisha, how has your interaction with them, what they have taught you directly, how has that informed your study? What have they shown you directly? And when you ask that question, then they can't respond because they're not communicating with the Orisha, not communicating with the abosom, not communicating with the Torotu in reality. They're just engaged in pseudo-esoteric practices and placing a gloss over those practices and pretending as though these are the ancient original practices, which they are not. So it's very simple to expose individuals who are either deliberately lying or the majority or just ignorant who believe that they're on something, but they're just so enamored with white pseudo-culture and pseudo-philosophy and pseudo-scholarship that they believe that is the real thing. And they believe we need to bring ourselves up to that level of pseudo-practice. In reality, that's not even on a level. We won't even call that a low level. It's not even on the level. So we don't want to drag ourselves down to that foolishness. We need to embrace our culture fully. So when we talk about oracular divination, Tahuti possesses and teaches divination. Sesha Abrewa possesses, teaches divination, and speaks through divination. And the abosom show up. They possess through possession, akom, as well as spiritual communication, unkom, and will show themselves so that our people, adults and children, can see them and identify them and describe them. At the shrine, during ritual practice, as well as in dreams in various forms. But specifically, we're talking about divination. So this is the way we learn divination directly from the abosom. That has always been the case. And again, it's not just for emergencies. Something's going wrong and we can't figure it out, so that's part of it. That's part of the, learning about medicine and so forth. But then we also, what is key, what's critical is oracular divination systems are the original the original books that we open to learn about everything in the physical world and the spirit realm. The forces in nature are the spirits that animate the physical aspects of creation. The spirits that animate the Oriya, the sun, animate Asase, the earth, animate Epo, the ocean, animate the Equim, the sky, and so forth, animate the various aspects of creation. Just like your spirit animates your physical body, the spirit of a dog animates the dog, the spirit of a plant gives life to the plant, the the spirit that animates the various planets, suns, moons, stars, black substance of space, rivers, oceans, mountains, thunder and lightning, and so forth, as we talked about last night with Yao, Osoro, which is Horo, Heru, Yao, Shongo, Hevioso, and so forth. That fourth in creation, like we went into detail about him last night, as part of our Afuraitkaitnut Bosom series, the various spirits that animate the different aspects of creation. These are the forces of nature. These are the abosom, the orisha, the vodou. They are the embodiments of divine order and creation. They are the organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. And your organs regulate order in your body. The organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being are the forces in nature, and they regulate order and creation. Therefore, when we attune to them through divinatory ritual, through oracular divination, we are able to glean from them and learn from them the order that undergirds all of creation, because they are the embodiments of that order and they regulate that order. Once we learn that from them, we can replicate what we learned and put it into practice when we're establishing our society. When we establish a society, a social order rooted in that divine order of creation that we learn directly from the abosom through Akan, possession, and Unkom, spiritual communication, then we establish a social order rooted in the divine order of creation, and that is a civilization as opposed to a society. So we talked about how we create civilizations, a civilized society, a social order rooted in the divine order of creation, whereas the whites and their offspring, white Asians, white Europeans, white Hindus, white Pseudo-Native Americans, white Arabs, white Hispanics, and so forth, they have societies, but they don't have civilizations because they are not capable of aligning with the forces in nature that undergird creation. Therefore, they cannot attune to the divine order of creation. They are spirits of disorder that are constantly repelling and being repelled and repulsed by the forces of divine order. So therefore, they cannot align with them, and they cannot replicate that which they cannot align with. Therefore, their societies are disordered societies, reflective of the discordance manifest in their spirit, which defines their spirit as spirits of disorder, spirits without an Okra, spirits without a soul. So that's all key, dealing with civilization, dealing with culture. Oracular divination is key to that. Now, in our Akan culture, as well as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut culture in general, we recognize that each Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut individual has an Okra or Okrawa, soul, divine consciousness, the male and female forms of that term, called Ka and Kait, or Kat in ancient Kemet, called Ori, Idu in the Yoruba tradition. But the Okrawa, is the term for the soul, divine consciousness. It is actually an abosom, a divinity that dwells in the head region. This is the individual's personal abosom assigned to guide him or her throughout life. It is Inyamewa and Inyame, the great mother and the great father, supreme being called Amenet and Amen in ancient Khanit and Kemet, who assigned the Okrawa to the spirit of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut individual pre-incarnation. The Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnut spirit, once infused within the Okrawa by Inyamewa, Inyame is sent into the ancestral realm, Asamando, to await reincarnation through one of his or her descendants. So, the process is someone makes their transition, your spirit leaves the physical body is buried and so forth. You make your transition. If you lived in harmony to a great extent to divine order, just on a fundamental level, you are welcomed into the ancestral realm, Asamando. You live in the ancestral realm with the other ancestresses and ancestors, your great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers, and so forth, relations. When it's time for you to return within a number of generations, before your spirit is drawn into the womb of the woman who's going to be your mother, before that happens, your spirit is drawn up to Inyamewa, Inyame, Amenet, Amen, Mawu and Lisa, and so forth, Komosu and Chukwu in the Igbo tradition, Olokun and Oloru in the Yoruba tradition, the great mother and the great father, they assign you a divinity, directs that divinity, go dwell in the head region of this person. install yourself in the head region of the spirit of this person and guide them throughout their lives. So this is a divinity that dwells in your head region, your Okra, or Okrawa, the Inu that dwells within you throughout the course of your life, that you communicate with, that you invoke, that you learn directly from. Your function in creation, your life focus, which we call Nkra and Nkrabea, the male and female aspects of your divine function, is encoded within that force. So that force is pulling you in your head region towards thoughts, intentions, and actions on a consistent basis that are in harmony with divine order, in harmony with your function at all times. When you get out of alignment with that pull and you're going in another direction and the force in your head is pulling you in a different direction, now you're disaligned and you manifest disorder and you come in contact with various obstacles. Spirituality is about aligning with that force, aligning your sunsum, your spirit, with the Okra. And when you align with the Okra, it's very similar to if you see someone jet skiing, the boat is, sailing across the water, the person has on the jet ski, they're holding on, and as long as they're in alignment with the boat, they glide across the water. If they get out of alignment with the boat and fall into the water, but they're still holding on, they're being dragged through the water and slammed into voids and slammed into other boats and other individuals and so forth, that's out of alignment. And it's the same with regard to the crop. This is a force in nature that has weight, that has power, that has substance. Encoded within that crop, it is your spirit, brain, it's a function you're to execute in the world, and configuration of spiritual energy that you're assigned to execute that function. So if you have a fiery function to execute in creation, that is your Nkrabia, your divine function, then you assign forces in nature to have fiery energy so that you can use that to execute the function. That's the She and the Shebia, the manner in which you wield that energy. So that fourfold division of the Kra, just like the fourfold division of the brain, the cerebral cortex with the left and right hemispheres, the cerebellum in the back with the left and right hemisphere, that's akin to the Nkra and Nkrabia, your divine function, and the She and the Shebia, the divine power you're given to execute that function. So when you're assigned to certain abosom, you have a certain function, you have certain power to execute that function, and you're inclined towards that kind of behavior, thoughts, intentions, and actions. You feel that as a pull in your head. And when you get out of alignment with that, of course, you have all kinds of problems. Again, the root of spirituality is to maintain that alignment and realign yourself when you get out of balance. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law. So you incorporate things, you learn things, incorporate things that you can use to harmonize with divine order. But then you restore balance when imbalance has occurred through ritual. So once you get out of alignment and you start suffering because you're out of alignment, you engage ritual practices to restore balance to your life, meaning restore that alignment with the Okra. All right. So, as we say, as cells within the great divine body of Nyame wa Nyame, we as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individuals have specific roles to play, just as every cell in your body is designed to play a specific role, execute a specific function in the body. This role or function encoded within the Okra, the spirit's brain, as we said, is the life focus, often referred to as the purpose or the destiny. And we talked about the pull of that force. It deals with your, allotted function in creation. We can be pulled by that force. When we deal with the Nanasom and Samafo, the ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, they guide us to realign with that force and keep us in alignment with that force. They give us direction on the best manner in which to align with the pull of the Okra. The abosom, the forces in nature, empower us to align with that force. And when we align with the pull of our Okra, the abosom give us the power to execute what is encoded within our Okra. So they empower us to follow the Okra. The Unsamafo guide us to follow the Okra based on our spiritual anatomy, based on our specific blood circle. And different taboos associated with dietary taboos and social taboos associated with our specific clan. Only the Unsamafo can show us how to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, the pull of the Okra, based on what blood circle you operate through and what taboos that you have that you must observe, but you're still in the midst of all of that. How do you align with that pull? The Enslavement have lived that life as part of that clan. They know how to align with that force in creation based on being from part of that clan, so they can show you how to do the same thing. So they give you that guidance. The abosom, on the other hand, empower you and replenish your energy to execute what has been encoded within your crowd, within your divine function, within your soul, your divine consciousness. So we can be positively influenced by the ancestresses and ancestors, deities, as well as being negatively influenced by discarnate, wayward spirits of deceased individuals who are not ancestresses and ancestors, by misguided ideas, false conditioning, compulsion, etc. Often these influences are misunderstood to be our first mind as well, and they're not. The misinterpretation of such influences leads to confusion and often chaos in life if not properly contextualized. However, when we truly attune to our Okra, our soul, the divinity who dwells within our head, we attune to our Nkra and Krabia, our encoded divine function, and our She and Shebia, the motive force of the spiritual capacity we have been given to carry out that divine function. So when you feel that pull of the Okra, sometimes people will say, my first mind told me to do this, and I went against it, and then it turns out things didn't work out. I should have went with my first mind. Sometimes that pull that you're calling your first mind is your Okra. But then sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're just being influenced by your ancestors who know what's in your crowd, so they're giving you some guidance, a push, some motivation, and you feel that, and you feel like that's your first mind, your crowd, which is not. But sometimes you get given pushes and motivation by discarnate spirits that are not your ancestresses and ancestors, earthbound, criminal-type spirits, or spirits that were anxious and suffering when they made their transition are still hanging around, pulling on the energy of other people, just like a homeless person harassing people whenever they walk by. When that kind of individual dies and their spirit is still hanging around the spot, they're constantly trying to latch on to people and harass people because they're going through anxiety, so they just want to express their anxiety to whoever is walking by. Sometimes you're feeling that motivation from those kinds of asumsum or spirits and so forth, and it's really not your first mind. So if you don't contextualize properly and be able to delineate between the force of the Okra, that divine force, the guidance from your Nsamanfo who are cultivated, the guidance from the abosom, that in comparison to some wayward, discarded, weak spirits who are trying to influence you, if you don't make those distinctions, then you can make all kinds of bad decisions. The more you deal with your crowd on a regular basis by aligning with it ritually, sitting at your shrine for your crowd, invoking the crowd so you can align with it on a regular basis, so you begin to know when is the Okra speaking. It's a different kind of energy when the Okra, the Inu, the Selido, as it's called in Vodun, the Chi, as it's called in Igbo, so that force in nature in your head region is communicating with you. But different kind of communication than the communication coming from the Nsamanfo, from the other abosom, and definitely from this kind of wayward spirits who are none of that. So it must be properly contextualized. As we are growing and developing consciously and spiritually, communication with our personal abosom, our Okra can sometimes be clouded by external influences and internalized conditioning, foisted upon us by external individuals and or entities. Thus, when our Okrawa attempts to communicate with us or show us the way, inform us of what thoughts, intentions, and actions are in harmony with or out of harmony with Nyame and Sheshe divine order, we are sometimes unable to hear or see clearly. We then make decisions that are self-destructive. Adebisa is a mechanism given to Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, and Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans only by Nyame, Amenet, Amen, Mawu, and Lisa, etc., to afford us the ability to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, even when we cannot seem to attune to the messages of our Okra at a given moment in our development. This ensures that the entire community of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people has the opportunity to harmonize with Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe, even if they have not yet fully matured spiritually. Such a mechanism supports harmony with the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual within them, the Abusi of the family, and the Omai of the nation. So Adebisa is a sign of civilization. It is a sign, for example, when they talk about civilization begins when people have a writing system, some of our people repeat that. Well, the whites and their offspring, when they learned how to write from our people, because they never created their own script. So the phonetic script used by English-speaking people and Latin and Sanskrit and everything else and so-called Hebrew and everything else, these scripts come directly from ancient Khanit, ancient Kemet, the hieroglyphic script, the pictorial script. We have the cursive version, as they call hieratic, as well as the demonic script, the phonetic script that they call Proto-Sinaitic, which is the precursor to the Canaanite script. And then later on, the whites and offspring would try to recast that as Hebrew, which it is not. There were no ancient Hebrews. Those scripts come directly from our culture. So the whites and offspring will say, well, civilization begins when you have a script. And then they lie about the fact that they didn't create a script. They'll say these scripts were created by them. They created writing, and once they began writing, then civilization began, which of course is inaccurate, coming from a twisted mind. That's a postulate that they put forward. In our culture, we know reality. Civilization begins when the abosom operates through individuals in society, and the divine order of creation is now infused within the human sphere. And we align ourselves with that divine order and establish a social order that is reflective of that divine order, because we have interacted with the spirits that actually undergird order and creation. And we begin to move in that capacity. So that is the foundation of civilization. That's the establishment of civilization. Before we begin writing anything, when the abosom possess and give us direction, and we move in harmony with that direction, then we're moving in harmony with divine order. Now you're civilized. That's it. So writing comes later through successive possessions. Eventually, Tahuti possesses, Seshat possesses, and they did teach us writing so that we can perpetuate the civilization that they assisted us with establishing. The establishment of the civilization is the forces of divine order moving through the physical bodies of the people so that we can attune to that divine order optimally and replicate it. But to perpetuate that order intergenerationally and from moment to moment to moment, day to day to day, even when people are not yet spiritually mature. They have not grown into spiritual maturity. They have not developed fully into a spiritually cultivated elder or elderess, yet they want to harmonize every thought, intention, and action with divine order, but they're not mature enough to recognize what's in harmony with divine order at every moment of every day. Somebody's 17, 18, 19, 20, 25, 26, they may not know what's exactly in harmony with divine order, every thought, every intention, every action, every moment of every day, because they haven't matured yet and haven't had certain experiences to internalize so that they can recognize this is in harmony with order, this will lead to certain kinds of results, this is out of harmony with order, this will lead to certain kinds of results. They don't have that experience in this particular lifetime yet, so they may not know what decision to make at a certain time. So how do you get an entire population to put them on the path of having the opportunity to align every thought, intention, and action individually as well as in a group with divine order if they haven't gotten to the point spiritually, mature-wise, where they can intuit that from their crop? When you receive divination, oracular divination, a system to inquire to query the abosom, the forces of divine order, query the Nanasom Mmusuo. And ultimately, you're querying the Supreme Being to find out, is this thought, is this intention, is this action, are these events in harmony with divine order so they can foreshadow what will happen if you engage those thoughts, intentions, and actions, what will happen if you do not. If you're in the midst of a situation or a situation is imminent, what can you do to reestablish order and neutralize a negative situation or avoid a negative situation or overcome a certain obstacle or exigency and so forth. We are given divination, therefore. We possess to establish civilization. We're given divination to perpetuate divine order amongst everyone in the population. And once that mechanism is provided by the abosom, now that is the sign of the perpetuation of civilization. Before we go forward, we just want to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. Okay, if you have any questions or comments in the chat room, of course, you must log in to communicate. If you have a question or comment on the phone line, just hit the number 1. All right, so back to the article. So we say a true Adebisa, a diviner uses Adebisa to show the querent, the one who's querying or asking the client and so forth, externally, to show them externally, but the querent Okra or Okrawa has been attempting to show him or her internally. When the Adebisa, a diviner, consults with the abosom and Nanasom Mmusuo, the abosom and Nanasom Mmusuo only convey what the querent Okra or Okrawa conveys, or encoded within the Okra is the querent's unique pathway to harmonizing every thought, intention, and action with Inyamewa, Inyame, and Sheshe divine order at all times, rooted in the culture of his or her ancestral blood circle. The abosom and Nanasom Mmusuo only support what the Okrawa conveys, or the Okrawa is the messenger of Inyamewa, Inyame to the individual. This reality is recognized by all Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, and we thus have terms in our various languages illuminating this cosmological reality. So what that is pointing to is, again, you have a Okra, you have a soul, a divine consciousness, a divinity, a force that was assigned to you, given to you by Inyamewa, Inyame before you entered the womb. So just like you have a physical body, and then you have a smaller body in your physical body in the head region called the brain, which regulates order in the larger body. Your spirit body is your sum. Inside the head region of the spirit body is that Okra, that Okrawa, that divinity, that Inyamewa, Inyame directed that divinity, said, you go dwell in the head region of this sum, this spirit, and direct him or direct her throughout the course of their lives towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with their function, which is rooted in divine order. And that deity obliges Inyamewa, Inyame as a messenger of Inyamewa, Inyame in your head region. So when you communicate with that force, that divinity will communicate with you. In our Khan culture, for example, that force is called the Kra. So my Kra, when we have a Akradin, a soul name, our soul's name is not only based on the day of the week that we are born, but the abosom that governs the day. So, for example, if someone is born on Benna Da, which is Tuesday, the day of Benna, the abosom Benna, the deity Benna, who's called Bedat or Heru Bedat, Heru Bekudet, the winged sun disk in ancient Kemet, he's called Benna. In our Akan culture, the same divinity, the abosom of fire, war, metal, hot metal, and so forth. He's Ogun in the Yoruba tradition, Ogun and Vodun and so forth, the Kengai and Igbo, but Benna in Akan is the most popular name. If you are assigned to that divinity, then the Okra that you're given, a little divinity sent by Inyamewa, Inyame will tell that divinity, you are going to dwell in the head region of this individual, this Afurakani person. That sphere of energy is governed by the great abosom Benna. So it becomes like a little child of Benna, a little child of the force in nature. Benna governs the planet Benna, or so-called Mars, the red planet, the planet of war, and so forth. It was called Heru Desher, the red Heru in ancient Kemet. This is why they call it Mars, the red planet in Latin, and the planet of war and everything else, because that is the abosom, Heru Bekudet, Tarakuti, Bena, who governs war, fire, hot metal, metal casting, and so forth, enforcing divine order, divine immunity and creation and all of that. So that's the major abosom, Bena, governing the divine immune system in the great divine body of the Supreme Being. If you are to have a function, if you are to be a cell, one of the immune system cells within the great divine body, if that is your function, then just like your immune system cells are part of the great immune system in your body, and if you come into being and Nyame wants you to be an immune system cell within their great divine body, then they will give you a Okra, a divinity that is colored by and moves through the great divine immune system, which is Bena. So Bena takes that little sphere of energy, infuses his Bena energy into it. Now that little Bena comes to take up residence in your head. It is a miniature Bena. It is a miniature Ogun. It is a miniature Ogu, a miniature Ikenga, a miniature Heru Behudet, a child of the great Heru Behudet. And that miniature Heru Behudet or Bena dwells in your head region and pulls you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that support divine immune function. So you'll have a natural inclination to wage war against disorder and its purveyor, a natural inclination to seek out disorder and exterminate it, a natural inclination towards martial arts and things like that, a natural inclination to seek out and have occupations that are eradicating disorder in various ways. Because you have that kind of energy, you are an immune system cell within the great divine body, governed by your Okra, whose name is Bena. He's a child of the great abosom Bena. Because he is a miniature Bena, then his name is Kwa Bena. Your soul's name is Kwa Bena, a servant Kwa of Bena, the great abosom Bena. When we say we have a Kradane or a soul name, that's our soul's name is Bena. I am born on Awusi Da or Akwesi Da, the day or Da of Awusi, of Asa. So my soul's name is Kwa Asi, Akwasi, or Kwesi, that divinity that dwells in my head region. His name is Kwesi. He's a servant of the great Awusi, the great Asi, the great Asa. He's a miniature child of that great divinity. He has the same kind of force and capacity. And he directs me, so when I consult that divinity, I will consult and say, Mikra Kwesi, Mipaocha, Cherimi no Kware, Mikra Naso Kwesi, Mipaocha, please, Cherimi no Kware, show me what is true, what is accurate. I'm communicating with this force of nature. The Kra that dwells in your head region is an abosom. It is an Orisha, it's a Vodou. It is a colleague of the other abosom. So just like you have other abosom, Oshun, and Ogun, and so forth, and Awusi, Ajuwa, Yao, Ya, Abba, and so forth, your Kra is a colleague of theirs. So you communicate with your Kra just like you communicate with another divinity. At some point, that communication will become more than just an inclination or a pull. That abosom will show himself or herself to you and communicate directly with you so that you can see that abosom. So it's a force in nature. That is the key. Encoded within that force that dwells in your head region is the specific function you're to execute in the world, the manner in which you're to execute the function. That's the Unkra and Nkrabia, the kind of energy you have been given and the manner in which to utilize that energy. That's the She and Shebia. So everything you need to know is encoded within that force dwelling within your head region, because it's a messenger ultimately of the Supreme Being. It is a child of one of the major abosom. So if it's Bena, it's a child of Bena. If it's Apena, it's a child of Apena Sekmet. My Kra is a child of Awusi, Asa. But ultimately, just like your cell is a child of the organ, and then but the organ is a child of the great body, my Kra is a child of Nana Awusi, but Nana Awusi, Asa, is ultimately a child of Inyamewa Inyame. So even though they sent that little soul through Awusi and it's governed by Awusi's energy, ultimately it's a messenger not only of Awusi but also of Inyamewa Inyame. Your Okra is a messenger of the Supreme Being directly to you because they directed that divinity to dwell within your head region. So everything you need to know is encoded within that force. If you become clouded, not able to see clearly or attune to that force because of external conditioning that you have incorporated, misinformation that you've been getting from television and churches and schools and media and false philosophies since you were a child, and from misinformation coming from other individuals and, interacting with individuals and developing misguided emotional reactions to certain things and habits and so forth. All these things can begin to cloud the clear, pure information and direction coming from the crowd that's streaming from the crowd on a regular basis whenever you invoke that divinity. So if you can't hear, can't see, but you need to know how do I align my thoughts, intentions, and actions with order in this specific circumstance, dealing with a certain kind of event, trying to overcome an obstacle, whether it's disease or whether it's something social or, whatever it is, spiritual, then the Adebisa foe, the diviner, can attune what they're doing. Any real diviner is really divining your Okra. They're communicating with your Okra to show you externally what your Okra has been trying to tell you internally that you have not been able to hear. And your Okra, which is a divinity and a colleague of the other divinities, will direct you, of course, in certain instances, to what other divinities govern a certain situation that you're dealing with and how to align with what their function in creation, direct you to what Nsamanfo are governing certain social situations that you need to align with, that you may have been neglecting and so forth, that is encoded within the Okra. So the diviner is really divining your Okra to see what's going on, see what your Okra has been trying to tell you, and then the diviner, if it's a real diviner, will be able to communicate to you externally what the Okra has been trying to communicate with you internally, because they can communicate with the Okra, just like they can communicate with the other abosom and Nanasom and Samanfo directly. Not just a technician, not just somebody who learns patterns of the way certain shells fall and learns the text associated with those patterns and memorizes them, and then when those patterns fall, they can memorize. That's just a technician. That's not a real diviner. A real diviner can communicate directly with the abosom. So at that point, the shells, when they fall and manifest a certain pattern with, the contractive side down, up or down or whatever, when those shells fall in a specific pattern and the expansive and contractive energy coming from the shell pattern manifests, then those shells simply lay out an energetic welcome mat or magnet for the abosom that governs the pattern. And the abosom comes and takes up residence, comes down and takes up residence on that mat, that welcome mat, that energetic welcome mat. And therefore, the Adebisa, or the Adebisa foe, or the real diviner, can communicate directly with that abosom, communicate directly with the Nsamanfo, the spirit of one of the spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors. They can see them, or they can hear them, they can feel them, they can communicate directly with them, and then convey to you what they are communicating, in addition to what the pattern and the shells and the text say, but they can communicate directly with the forces of nature. And therefore, also learning directly what your Okra is communicating to them to show you externally what the Okra has been trying to show you internally. So that's what a real diviner is doing. Many people get quote unquote initiated very often to empty pots. They learn a great deal of text and memorize text and a great deal of rituals and memorize rituals, memorize a number of different things, but they're not communicating with any abosom at all. And they can't see an abosom, hear an abosom, communicate at all. So all they do is memorize patterns, and they don't know what spirit is manipulating the shells to fall in that specific pattern. They don't know if it's the spirit of the crowd, the individual, abosom or Nsamanfo, or just a wayward spirit in the room, because they can't communicate, because they're not real divine. And there are a lot of, we would say the majority of individuals who are selling their services are those kind of pseudo divine. And this is why their divinations are hit and miss. Very often miss it. So sometimes they'll hit on, the abosom there, the orisha there, because the pattern falls and they've memorized the pattern. It so happens that abosom orisha has manifested. But then sometimes it's just a wayward spirit. They're manipulating the falling of the shells, and they read that same pattern and say, oh, well, in this Ogun is speaking, and you need to do this, 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 and this. And the individual does that, and it does not resolve the issue. And then very often the so-called priest will end up blaming the client, saying, well, you didn't have enough faith in what you were doing, and you thwarted the effort because you weren't really focused, and you didn't have the proper intent, and you need faith and intent for these things to work. Totally inaccurate. Faith and intent has nothing to do. Only thing intent has to do, if you're pure and you want to engage in proper functioning, then the abosom assist. If you're deliberately trying to engage in perversity, they have nothing to do with you. They repel you. Intent with regard to you want to do the right thing and you're open to doing the correct thing, that's one thing. We're talking about you need to have faith and so forth. Faith has nothing to do with reality. No basis in reality. The abosom exists. They function according to divine order. When you align with them, you are able to attune to that order and bring it into your life. If you do not align with them, if you repel them by engaging in disorder, then you will not be able to align with that which is order. The same thing with the Nanasom and Samafo. It has nothing to do with faith or belief or anything like that. All right. So let's get back down to, so we talked about what a true Adebisa foe, diviner, engages in. We talked about the function of the abosom and the manfo. And so on this section, the last part of this section, there are various forms of Adebisa because there are various forms of calm, spiritual communication. Listening to your Nananom Manfo is a form of calm, spiritual communication. The playing of achene, drums, is a form of calm, spiritual communication. Ritual song, ejum, is a form of calm, spiritual communication. Ritual dance, etsa, atsa, is a form of calm, spiritual communication. The achene drum becomes the instrument by which calm or communication is affected. The voice is the instrument by which calm is affected through ejum or ritual song. The use of shells, stones, bones, water, and more are instruments of various forms of Adebisa through which calm or spiritual communication is affected. Okay, so that's the section dealing with Adebisa or communication in general. And we're going to take a couple of calls, and then we're going to get into the aspect dealing with Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in America. Okay. Okay, Michiawo had a question or a comment, number 5808.
Michiawo, yes. Thank you again for this topic, particularly about Kaitnut. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it effectively. Afuraitkaitnut, Afuraitkainu in North America, for Black people, Africans in North America in particular. I had two questions, and if we run, too much time, we can just deal with the first one. But I'm trying to form this in a way that I don't, create a rift. But it seems like we here in North America, we're the furthest removed physically and spiritually from the continent. And those of our brethren who are still on the continent, it seems like there's just such a minority of them who, accept and embrace their own ancestral traditions. And I find myself arguing with them about embracing their ancestral traditions. I was married to a Nigerian, and I would ask him about the Yoruba tradition. He'd stop me. No, there's no Yoruba religion. Those are just Yoruba people. That's just the name of the group. There's no Yoruba religion. It's like he was paranoid that I was even asking about it. So I say all that to say we're in a unique position over here, and a lot of us, I notice, are starting to ask questions and wonder, what did we do before our encounters with Chiwadefo? How did we worship? So the question is kind of for you. How did you know that it was time to start teaching this knowledge beyond the Akwamu, group that you discovered that you belong to? Was there something that came through and said, okay, it's time to, bring these people closer to us because they're starting to wake up, they're starting to ask? Or is it something that most of us have had all along and we just subconsciously suppressed it?
Now, that's the answer. Your last statement is the answer. So just like most of our people, we were raised up, here in America, brainwashed with, white culture, Christianity, but we all have an ancestral urge, and it's rooted in your craft. So when we have this urge to find out what's true, surely when they talk about Jesus walking on water and all that we know that's nonsense the first time we hear it, even when we're children. We're like, get out of here, that's nonsense. But they keep drilling it into people's heads, so depending on the individual, some people begin to believe it, some people just, believe it half-heartedly. It just depends on the person. But we do question it, and the reason we question that as well as any other pseudo-religion or white culture or anything else is because our cry is motivating and telling us all along that these things are absolutely false. Our Nanasom and Samanfo, who have been with us pre-incarnation, who were with us when we were living in Asamando in the ancestral realm, they are directing us, showing us that information is false. You need to get back involved in your culture. The abosom who were born with us, who have never left us, who came into the world with us, they've always guided us as to returning to our culture. So when we feel these urges to return to our cultures, that ancestral mandate is within every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut person in the Western Hemisphere. Some of our people decide to go ahead and follow that and embrace that, and some people find a number of excuses why they should not. They're being controlled by individuals, or they're being, a number of different things. They're being forced into different positions intellectually and spiritually to come up with rationalizations about why they should not embrace ancestral culture. They've been, inculcated with fear, doubt, self-hatred, all kinds of things. So some of us continue to move forward to re-embrace the culture, and the more you move towards that alignment with order, and you open yourself, as we said, the intent to open and get real information, when you have that intent, and it's a real intent, then the Mmusuo will share that information. They've been sharing it all along, but we've been repelling it, just like a magnet repelling, the other magnet across the table. We're repelling that information because our polarities have been reversed, So, but the key is it's an ancestral urge that's buried within the crowd. You have a function. It's like every plant, animal, mineral, and so forth has a function. The abosom has a function. That function is buried in your crowd. It's encoded there, so you're always being pulled. It's up to us to align with that pull. So us putting this information out, it's just us aligning with that same pull that's in every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut person in the world, which includes our people over here. We've been removed, like you said, the furthest removed geographically from the continent, of course, because of the Mmusuo Kese, and the furthest removed from the culture with respect to, for example, we don't speak our languages fluently. Even some people in the Caribbean, South America, they, in certain instances, the ones who escaped into the forest and so forth, the Maroons and mountains and established independent settlements, they continue to speak certain dialects of the language. So that's one thing in North America, that we didn't maintain a fluency with the language. But as long as you have Akan and Nkom, the capacity to engage spirit possession and spirit communication, then you can't lose a culture if you understand Debra, reincarnation, and communication with the ancestors and ancestors. It's impossible to lose a culture when you can communicate with the people who founded the culture. And they possess our people, they communicate with our people, they led our people out of enslavement, led us to freedom, directed us to places where we needed to run, directed us to ways to, come together and group, regroup once we regroup, once we escape plantations, how to bind together, arm ourselves, and go back and kill the whites and offspring and force abolition, force emancipation. So that was under the direction of our Nsamanfo, our abosom, so we never stopped the culture. So the key is, it's buried within us, it's encoded within us, and we have to open ourselves to that reality. And like you said, the last part of your statement was, we've suppressed things based on being brainwashed and being conditioned to suppress things since we were children, but we just have to break out of that. And all it takes is, it could be one sentence or one ritual prayer, or it could be one thing that somebody heard on YouTube, or one thing that they heard somebody, say when they came across somebody talking about culture, they just, quote unquote, happened to come in contact with someone. Their Nsamanfo put them in the position to come in contact with somebody on the bus or at a store, at work, or walking down the street, who has the confirmation that they've been asking the Nsamanfo for, even though they didn't know they were asking the Nsamanfo. They just had that yearning to know what's true, what's false, because I want to know what's accurate. That yearning in and of itself is just like a child, a baby, pulling on the mother to receive some milk. That yearning is a pull on the abosom and Nsamanfo, and they respond by directing the right individual to connect with you at the right time, and then you get that information. It's a confirmation of what you've been asking for, and now you have a platform by which to move forward and go deeper into the culture that's rooted within you anyway.
Well, that answers that question. If we had time, I wanted to ask another one, but yeah, I can understand if you have others in queue that want to get through.
No, we can ask. I got one more call, but we can get through it, and I can answer it quickly. And then if you need some more information, I can send you some information as well. Okay.
Regarding Adebisa, who can do it? I mean, do we have to know what clan we belong to? Are there certain people who are qualified to do it? Can any of us, do Adebisa for ourselves? How do we know when we are able to communicate that way, or does somebody have to be initiated to show us how? Or that's basically under what conditions and who can do it.
Right. So the thing is, everybody has a specific function executing creation, which is the Okra and Nubia. There are two parts to the answer. On one hand, every time you ask anything, every time you inquire, every time you seek to know, every time you provoke the abosom through seeking to know, your desire to know is magnetic. It provokes the abosom and pulls on them just like a child pulling on the breast of the mother. That is an invocation to them. That yearning to know what is noquade, what is truth, is a yearning. You seek to know. That is a query, and that is an inquiry. And when you receive that information, you just engaged in a divinatory process. Remember, bisa means to ask. So when you call bisa or go ask, you're engaged in divination at that point. So every time you pray to the abosom, pray to the Nsamanfo, sit down, engage in susu home meditation, to listen to the abosom because you have something you want to know about or want to learn about, you're engaged in a divinatory process at that moment. That's an oracular process at that moment. So that's something that's very important, because some people will try to compartmentalize divination and put it in a space where certain people are doing it and nobody else is. And in reality, every time you query any force, ancestral spirit or otherwise, you're engaged in a divinatory process. So that's key. So everybody is doing it. All of our people are doing it on some level, children as well as adults. The second part of the answer is, because everyone has a kra, a soul of divine consciousness, for example, the same thing with the divinity. Tahuti has a specific function. He's a mouthpiece of the Supreme Being, divine wisdom, male. Seshat has a function. She's the mouthpiece of the Supreme Being, female. So they have their specific function. There are other individuals who have specific functions. Some people are naturally inclined towards healing. and they learn how to lay hands and heal people because they can generate that kind of tumi or power, ashe, through their ba, their divine living energy, or ba'et. So they can move that energy through their hands and lay hands and heal people. So, for example, the sister who founded Ra Seki, also called Kemetic Reiki, but the title that her Nsamanfo gave her, Ra Seki, Kemetic Reiki, using the hands to lay hands and heal people. So they teach that and certify people and so forth. That's coming from the abosom that governs her. And when you look on the website, you'll see her link, by the way. This is one of the businesses that we will be targeting in the next couple of weeks. Some people have that function to heal. Now, even with that, that's a divinatory process as well. But even beyond that, just dealing with healing itself, some people are naturally inclined towards dealing with herbs and medicine, like Dr. Phoebe Adiro with the naturopathic medicine and Kingu Health, which is one of the other businesses that we supported a couple of weeks ago.
Right, yes. I just ordered an herb package from her.
Healing. Oh, you did? Okay. Yes, she did say a number of people contacted her. So Yerase for connecting. But so somebody, and she's, collecting dry herbs and selling dry herbs, natural herbs and so forth, as well as being a primary care, holistic naturopathic physician. So having that natural inclination to go out in nature, get those herbs, get those medicines, procure those medicines in the right fashion, at the right time of year, right time of day or night, right time of the lunar phases and so forth, to get that medicine, to give it to our people, that natural inclination, that's a function. And you have other people who are naturally inclined towards engaging the divinatory process to serve the community in that capacity, because that is what was encoded within their craft. So you have some individuals who that is their function, to, serve people, serve the community in that capacity on a larger scale. The difference between such an individual and somebody else is not that that individual can communicate with the abosom and you can't, because the abosom that you were born with, it is your responsibility to communicate with them. The Nanasom and Nsamanfo, spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors who are connected to your specific blood circle, it is your responsibility to communicate with them. It is your responsibility to communicate with your Okra and develop that level of communication. So it's not that you can't communicate with the abosom and Nsamanfo. Everybody can, children and adults, and not only can we, it is our responsibility as adults to do that on a consistent basis. That's for everybody. That's just common. Learn at puberty. The difference between us and somebody who has that capacity to engage the abosom in a divinatory fashion is that they do that for the community at large as opposed to just for themselves and for their children. So some people do have that capacity. But the difference is, and the key is, we all have that capacity on some level to do basic forms of query on our own. It's very similar to medicine. Most people, when your children have a problem, a medical issue, they're sick or something like that, 99% of the time, you don't take them to the doctor. You know what to do to take care of congestion, runny nose, headache, whatever it is. You're the healer. You're the healeress. If it's some unusual situation where they need surgery or something like that, then, or they break a bone, now you could straighten out their leg and you could wrap something around there and tell them not to move their leg and hopefully it'll fuse together right. Or you could go to a specialist who does that all the time and who's very good at that. Right. So that's like a priest or a priestess. They're like a specialist, and then they have that function to serve the community in that capacity. So that less than 100% of the time that you don't either have the knowledge or, capacity to affect that healing with the child, then you take them to the doctor. It's the same thing with a priest or a priestess. So most of the time, most of the spiritual issues that we have, when we communicate with our Okra, communicate with the abosom, communicate with our Nanasom and Nsamanfo, we can resolve those issues. Every now and then, something unusual takes place, or it happens something individual or on a mad scale with the collective, something is happening in the community, and the whole community is suffering, like, a number of people are dying in a certain area. or a number of people, there are a number of car crashes in the same area. People are dying of car crashes all of a sudden. People are saying, well, what's going on? Why is everybody dying of car crashes at this particular corner? And then they go to somebody who's a specialist, and then they find there's some discarnate spirits hanging around that corner because they were murdered there before, and they're interfering with people's, attention span when they stop at that stop sign, and all it takes is a little bit of interference, and then you hit the accelerator at the wrong time, and it causes a crash. So that Okomfo, that spiritualist, that priest or priestess, goes out and removes those spirits from the area ritually, or gives a prescription to the community so that they can go out and cleanse that area, and then that takes care of a communal problem. So they have that function. So there are particularized functions with regard to Okomfo, Abosomfo, priests and priestesses and so forth. But again, that's a specialty, but it does not preclude the fact that each one of us, children and adults, has the capacity and the responsibility to engage in some form of oracular divination.
So we can, if we want to, cast shells at our shrine, or do we need some more training? Do we need to be, to do it more often, to go to our shrines more often and get into a habit before we can actually see, answers from casting shells at our shrines or any other form of divinations at our shrines?
Well, the first thing you want to do is develop a strong relationship with your Nananom Nsamanfo at the Nsamai Komre ancestral shrine, even before engaging, because utilizing shells is a form of inquiry, but the first form of inquiry is sitting down and communicating. You pull libation or whatever, give an offering, and sit down and communicate. When they start communicating on a regular basis, and you begin to notice the means by which they communicate and how they communicate, and particularly with you in different ways, whether it's through clear sentience, a clear audience, a clairvoyance, or through dreams, or through more so through animal totems, whatever it is, and you start learning the way they communicate and how to place their signature on their communications. Then you can move forward once you're grounded in that kind of communication. If they direct you to utilize another instrument or implement, then you can do that as well. There's some groups, cultures that would tell you, first thing you need to do is get these coconuts or get these cowrie shells. You need to do this, you need to do that, and start. And what people are doing is they really don't know who they're communicating with. They'll set up a little shrine. Somebody will say that they consecrated it. What is that consecration? You don't know if they consecrated or not. You don't even know if they're quote-unquote consecrated. You don't know who did what for them and if they're even connected. Our culture comes directly from our ancestors. The abosom who came into the world with us are who we communicate with. The Nsamanfo who came into the world and are assigned to us based on our incarnation, we deal directly with them, not somebody else coming in and telling us, you need to do this, unless they're part of your family. You know what I mean? So, but the key is you deal with your family members. Nsamanfo first, develop that strong connection, interaction, communicate with them. And if they direct you to utilize certain implements, whether it's bones or shells, water, whatever it is, mirrors, whatever it is, if you get that direction from your Kra and the specific kind of guidance from your Nsamanfo rooted in your Kra to utilize those implements, then you do so. If not, then you don't.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was getting at. How do we know when it's time? Are there some requirements that need to be met? Or so basically, we'll just know when our Nananom and Nsamanfo communicate with us after more regular sessions and communications at our shrines.
Right, and they will confirm things. So it won't just be a feeling. The more you develop that kind of communication, they will confirm things. So they will confirm what you get from the shrine. They'll confirm it in your everyday life, so you will know for sure before you move forward on just things in general, including if it is within your Kra, in Kra and Krabia, to utilize certain kinds of implements to divine with, then that was part of your Kra when you came into the world. But if it's not, then it's and somebody tells you this is what you need to do, and they don't know what's in your crop, which a lot of people are casting. They're dealing with Adebisa, dealing with different kinds of little divinatory systems, and they're getting all kinds of different answers. Then they're making decisions based on these little patterns that fall, and they say, well, if, Oyekun falls, or Jife falls, or whatever, this means that, and then they say that, and then they move forward, and they create all kinds of hit and miss chaos in their lives because they really don't know what they're doing. But they're being told, do this. And they focus on the times when things seem to work out, and then they kind of ignore the times when things don't work out and kind of push that under the rug and only focus on the things that do work out. And they're just playing themselves because, I mean, who are you trying to, impress? The abosom and Nsamanfo are born with you. They're trying to guide you, and then you listen to somebody else who doesn't know what they're talking about. So the key is to listen to your people that came into the world with you, who were with you before you even got to the womb, and get that information directly from them.
Okay, I'm glad I was able to get that clarity on that question. So I appreciate that. May I say?
Okay. Okay, we have one more call, and then we're going to get into that second part of the information. Okay, Michiawo, number 9854. You had a question or comment?
Yeah, Michiawo. Yeah, it was basic, Brother Kwesi. Basically, what you were talking about was with the sister earlier, because my thing was with my late husband, and having some issues in the home as well as with myself, anxiety issues and a lot more other stuff. So I was just wanted to ask the same thing. I mean, what do you to commune more and be engaged with the shrine, with our abosoms more. But that's where I was getting at too, because it's getting worse, I don't know what to do.
Now, were you asking if you should commune more based on that situation?
No, yeah, not just based on that, but just having a relationship with them, of course. But I just how you would talk about the wayward spirits that just linger around or whatever because they're here and they're caught here. So yeah, I mean I've been seeing this throughout the years. I didn't realize that until I started studying with what you have provided for us, and I realized I have. Like I said, I have anxiety attacks that I can't. I've over the past 3 years, I've gone to the doctor. They can't find anything. And the last doctor that I saw, he said, "Well, have you had any traumatic experience?" And I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, the death of my late husband." And I, went off to explain that. And he said, "Well, that's the only thing I can explain where these attacks are coming from." I mean, they literally put me on a monitor and monitored my temperature and all that stuff, and they could see it, every 10, 15 minutes. And it's still the same way today. The anxiety is, is still there. The children, they're having dreams, and dreams with myself. I mean, he's there, he's in it, he's, So just trying to figure out what to do.
Okay. Now, one thing, dealing with, did you have a relationship? And I know you don't want to get into, details, on the phone, like in public, but, I mean, you can send me an email, but one thing that we would look at is the kind of relationship he had with his family and the relationship you had with his family. If he's the one who's, showing up a lot and causing a lot of stuff, it may be because, and it would have to be investigated, maybe because that he was, like you said, he's kind of earthbound, he's still holding on, hasn't made that transition to Asamando himself. It may have something to do with certain family members, and you may have a connection with some of his family members that you can help in that process, and you can introduce them to certain things. The easiest thing would be if you could connect with some of them and introduce them to certain things, because if he's visiting you all, then he's probably visiting them as well, more than likely. But of course, it would have to be investigated. But I'm just saying in general, I know you don't want to give too many details. If you connect with some of them to assist in that process to help him move forward and connect with his own Nsamanfo and stop being so isolated and focused on trying to remain and influence what's going on here. So that would be the most direct way to assist them, to help them move that process forward, because that's their blood relative. If they're not willing or able, or, if there's some reason they can't do whatever, then you would have to, of course, you can do things yourself as well. But send me an email and we can talk about that.
Okay. Nanasom.
Okay, now say that. Okay, so just want to go through the chat room real quick, make sure we didn't miss anything. Okay, so that kind of thing is a common occurrence with our people here in North America, but just around wherever we are in the world. Sometimes we have Nsamanfo or discarnate individuals who do not want to, they feel like they left the world too early. They're anxious about that. They're still trying to hold on, still trying to hang on. They make themselves repulsive to the ancestral realm. Some of them is just, immaturity or depression or things like that. You have other individuals who are on another level with they were engaged in something criminal or lustful, malicious or whatever. They engage in that kind of lustful, kind of malicious type behavior, then they will be repelled from Asamando, and they will be, hanging around causing people problems. Those kinds of individuals, you engage in ritual measures to repel those kind of criminal type discarnate spirits, and there are different things you can do for that. But those who are not necessarily criminal, but they're just depressed, anxious, and they're still trying to latch on to people, in that situation, for example, the most direct thing that can be done, the best thing that can be done, the optimal thing, is for the individual's own family members who he's connected to by blood, or if it's a female connected to by blood, for them to engage their relative, to help them make their transition to be with their other relatives who have made transition in the ancestral realm. That's the best mode. Of course, some of our people are so, steeped in Christianity and Islam and other kinds of nonsense that they don't want to have anything to do with that at all. So then you would have to engage that process. And the way you would do that is not through your Nsamanfo, but through the abosom. Because your Nsamanfo are dealing with you as, specifically people in your blood circle and so forth. But the abosom, forces in nature that are connected to you, but also connected to us. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in general, they're the forces of nature, would be through one or more abosom that will affect that process. So it's a case-by-case thing, but there are definitely things that can be done to remedy that situation. All right. So we talked about the nature of Adebisa, what it is, what its function is, it being simply to query, to consult the abosom, Nananom, Nsamanfo, to learn of the nature of past, present, future potential circumstances and events in relationship to our thoughts, intentions, and actions measured against the standard of Nyame Wa Nyame and Sheshe divine order. The abosom are the ones who taught us divination. They possess, communicate, and we learn directly from them. And therefore, not only learning about things that we need to overcome situations, but also just to learn about nature itself. This is how we were able to establish civilization, by learning the structure of creation and replicating that structure. So therefore, we can build temples, build pyramids, build structures, and so forth, because we're learning about the architecture of creation, how things are structured, learning about the body and so forth, by invoking the forces in nature that govern these things, and then we have that insight, we can see into things, and we can replicate that and begin to build. So we can study nature, we can learn from nature. There's the example, for example, and to tie this in, learning not only through divinatory practices like that, inquiry through formal ritual practices, but even when we've been forced to come to the Western Hemisphere. We use that example often of George Washington Carver. People know about George Washington Carver, who created hundreds of products from peanuts and sweet potatoes and so forth that revolutionized agriculture in the United States as well as the world, to the extent that Achiwadipo president is honoring George Washington Carver and so forth. Not that, a commendation from the President of the United States means anything, but we're just saying that, he was able to transform agriculture through the hundreds of products that he was able to extract and see that will be within that potential, within that peanut, within that sweet potato. But when you learn about where did he get the information from, he talks about specifically going out into nature every morning, early in the morning, communicating with nature, the spirits in nature, the spirits of the plants and so forth, learning from them, and then going into the laboratory and replicating what he learned from them. That process, that evidence within an Afurakani man in America communicating with the spirits in nature to replicate the order that they manifest in nature and replicate that in the laboratory and then solve problems that are plaguing our people in the Afuraitkaitnut community, in the society, and in the world. That same process is an ancient process that goes back to ancient Khanit, ancient Khamet, the people going to the abosom, to Huti Sashat, all the various abosom, learning directly from them the order in creation, the order that undergirds creation. Then we replicate that order through our creation, through the things that we build, through the medicines that we procure from plant life and animal life and mineral life and so forth, to solve problems and create new structures and new possibilities. In the ancient world, he did the same thing here in present time, the same process. It is a form of Adebisa. He's going to ask, Kobisa, to query, ask, should I take from you? Because I need to heal someone. What can I take from you? I need to create a certain kind of substance that will bring balance to a situation that's imbalanced. And hundreds of products developed from that. But he always said he went directly to nature to learn directly from nature, to attune to nature. Now, the White Offspring, when they're writing books, they'll say, oh, he prayed to God and learned about the plants. But he will tell you directly that he showed, quote-unquote, love to the plants, meaning law to the plants, attuned to them, and learned directly from them. So, just like he has that capacity, he did not go get on a plane and fly to Nigeria or go to Cuba or go to Haiti, get initiated and go through a period of being a Iyawo or a Kompowa and all of that. He didn't have to go through outside of himself, outside of his blood circle, to learn how to communicate, to learn Adebisa. Because we have incorporated these things and carried these things within our blood circles from Afuraka, Afuraitkai, all the way here. So when we talk about our book, for example, Hoodoo people, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in North America, Akan, Custodians of Hoodoo from ancient Hoodoo or Udunu land, Khanit and Nubia, we're showing, as we said earlier, the term Hoodoo meaning medicine, root work, root conjuring, and so forth, the root worker, root doctor, medicine people, but also meaning to conjure. Undu in Akan means medicine specifically from root trees and so forth. The Undu Yefo is the root worker, and also the conjurer, also called Udun Sinifo, the two different kinds of healers. Udun Sinifo, the root worker, root doctor, physician. Undu Yefo is also a root doctor, but also a conjurer, because Undu also means to conjure, to call the spirit down. Those same terms exist in ancient Kemet. Undu meaning to conjure, to call the spirit down. Undu also meaning medicine, Undu also meaning plants and trees and sticks and so forth. Talking about root work, root medicine, root doctors, and you have Undu Fo, or Udunu, which are the people. The land of Khanit, Nubia, was called the Undu land, and the people were called the Undu people. So we use the exact same term to call ourselves in ancient Khanit, ancient Nubia, call our ritual practices. We migrate to West Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, we use the same terms, refer to our people and our ritual practices. When we move to North America, we continue to use Hoodoo, dealing with our ritual practices and the people themselves. So we have the same culture. We still can communicate with the abosom. Through Akom and Unkom, spirit possession, spirit communication, we get that information directly from the forces in nature, just like George Washington Carver. This is something that is intergenerationally and transcarnationally inherited. So there are priests and priestesses, meaning elders and elderesses, in the Hoodoo tradition in North America that have passed down the capacity intergenerationally, transcarnationally, of not only to be able to engage the forces in nature, but also to serve the community in the capacity as that kind of ritual specialist. That is in our blood circle. So our people will know when somebody's a child, when they're born, the older woman, older man, elder, elderess in the community, when they're helping to, helping the young mother with the child, and they're sitting with the child, and they're attuning to the spirit of the child, they're engaged in oracular divination, Bisa, to go and ask. They'll tell you which ancestral spirit this is, who has returned, what ancestral spirit is with him, what grandmother, what grandfather, and so forth. If they were born with a veil over their face and so forth, if they were born to be a seer, they watch the child as they're growing up to see if these are one of the children who is going to be a healer. One's going to work with the medicine. One's going to be a root doctor, root worker, and so forth, conjurer. Once they know what's what through Adebisa, through communication, then they take this child through training. They take the child through an apprenticeship. They'll take them with them when they're going to pick roots, and they're learning about the medicine, when they're engaged in ritual and so forth. We have a priesthood and priestesshood in Hoodoo, just like we have it in Voodoo, which is the Ifon and Ebe tradition in Louisiana and different parts of the South. Juju is a Yoruba term. That is the Yoruba tradition in North America. So just like you have Lukumi in Cuba, the Yoruba tradition in Cuba, the Yoruba tradition in North America is Juju. Same tradition. There's about 90 seconds left in the broadcast. Online, if you want to continue to listen past 11 o'clock, you must call in so you can get on the phone and finish listening. The phone number is 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. And you have about 1 minute to call in. It's 573-383-0635. And we have like maybe 15 or 20 minutes left of information. So this is why we say there are various forms of Adebisa which were retained, reconstituted by our Nanasom in North America through the practice of African-American, quote-unquote, Hoodoo. We say authentic Hoodoo before the corruptions of European pseudo-Native American influences, perversion, and so forth. We say that various forms of divination we're talking about. The abosom and our Nanasom did not desert us once we crossed over Epo Abena and Bosom Po, the female and male of the ocean. They are carried within our Kra Nemoja, our soul and blood. This is why they still speak to us today. They possessed us on plantation, helped us to escape, helped us to find out when the whites and offspring were coming after us with their militias to try to drag us back into enslavement, so that we would be prepared, we could wage war successfully and remain free. And this is what we did. The abosom didn't leave us. Just like in Haiti, they overcame the whites and their offspring and took over the whole island and became independent. In Jamaica, the Maroons in Jamaica took over the mountainous regions and other places and freed themselves and are still independent, many of them in the mountain regions of Jamaica, autonomous and so forth, freed themselves from enslavement in the quote-unquote 1700s and have been free ever since. Akan in Suriname, for example, Maroon societies freed themselves in the so-called 1700s and have been free in those independent settlements ever since, powered by their ancestral religion. The Akwamu and St. John's Island took over the entire island for a number of months, powered by the ancestral religion and so forth. Black people in America, we had a different situation, so we waged war in a different fashion, and we forced abolition, forced emancipation. Okufo Yao, warrior Yao called Nat Turner, waging war against the whites and their offspring and massacring the whites and their offspring. Okufo Telemake, the Marbisi, planning wide-scale insurrections. Okufo, Gabriel Prosser, and so forth, planning thousands and thousands of people to come together to wage war against the whites and their offspring. These things struck such fear in the hearts of the whites and their offspring that they began to be forced into the position to promote abolition and eventually emancipation, because they feared that we would massacre all of them. And these insurrections were jumping off on a regular basis. They were forced by fear of our people to move to emancipation. You know that the whites and their offspring did not want to emancipate black people. They did not want the abolition of enslavement. They would have been perfectly happy if we were still enslaved right now. They could not continue with with enslavement, because our people began to massacre them, and that was powered by the ancestral religion. So the freedom and emancipation of all of the enslaved people in North America was powered by the ancestral religion. The abosom never left us, and that includes those who are children who were born into the world. They have a a function to execute, which is rooted in being healers, and the people who are already engaged in that practice, they see that in the children, they begin to cultivate it in the children. The only thing we have, quote-unquote, lost is fluency in our language. But outside of that, spirit possession and spirit communication allows us to align with the forces in nature on a consistent basis and get that guidance from the Nsamafo on how to align our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And, of course, those Nsamafo have also led us back to reclaim that language and reconnect that language to our ancient ancestral culture, our ancient ancestresses and ancestors of ancient Khanit as well as Kemet. Okay, so when we're going through this document, again, we want to talk about that divination portion in general, not specifically the ODWIRA divination. One thing that's critical, of course, Adebisa divination, just in general, is for Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, African people, black people only. The abosom, the Orisha Bodu, Ntoru, as divine embodiments of order in Abodie creation, have never, do not now, and will never communicate with the Achiwadiefo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring. This includes all white Americans, white Europeans, white Hispanics, white Latinos, Latinas, white Arabs, white Hindus, white Asians, white pseudo-Native Americans, or simply migrants from Asia, all non-black people. The forces in nature have never communicated with them. They never will. The Nanasom have never communicated with them, and they never will. These are spirits of disorder. That's what defines them. They don't have a Okra, an anchor in divine order, a force of nature that guides them. They are spirits without a Okra, therefore they are spirits of disorder, and no divinities have ever or will communicate with them. And that is true until they become extinct. That has always been true and always will be true. That's an immutable law. So any individual or any divination that purports to convey messages from the abosom, Orisha Bodu, Ntoru, and Nananom Nsamafo, Egungun, Kuvito, Akutu, to non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnit clearance is a pseudo-divination. This is true whether it is conducted by a diviner from Afuraka, Afuraitkai, Africa, or outside of Afuraka, Afuraitkait, Africa. So, critical to understand, those who conduct so-called divinations for non-Afurakanu, non-Afuraitkaitnut are actually doing nothing more than evoking wayward, disordered, discarnate spirits of deceased individuals. These deceased individuals' communications are then passed off fraudulently as communications from deity. such pseudo-divinations are conducted on a regular basis in Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnut, and in the Western Hemisphere. Some so-called initiated individuals conduct these fraudulent divinations knowingly, while most others do so unknowingly because they are following the pseudo-spiritual paradigm of the individual or individuals who initiated, quote-unquote, and trained them into and within a pseudo-priesthood. And we have a publication dealing with that in some detail. The key point here is there are individuals who have been, quote-unquote, trained, and that not just here, but on the continent. And when you go back 100 years, 200 years, and back, you have the infection of Islam, infection of Christianity. Some of the criminals in our society were embracing disorder and embraced the whites and their offspring because they were disgruntled with the larger society and wanted to get back at certain individuals or certain people who were in charge. They would embrace Islam even though it was a pseudo-religion. They knew it was a pseudo-fake religion, but they would embrace anybody who was against the larger group. And they embraced those individuals. Now they're engaged in disorder. So the ritual practices they engage in is not going to be anything orderly, because if they were orderly, they wouldn't be connected with the whites and their offspring in the first place. The abosom would not allow that. So the only spirits that they can work with are discarnate, wayward, criminal-type deceased spirits. And they work with those, and they make talismans for those, and shrines for those, and so forth. And they've been doing that for hundreds of years. And those individuals pass themselves off as priests and priestesses. So when they do, quote-unquote, divination, or they query these little deceased criminal spirits attached to a shrine or a talisman, they will pass those off as divination with divinity. And anybody can come to a alcoholic, a drunk, or criminal and give them something, and they'll tell you whatever you want them to tell you if you give them some alcohol or some drugs or some money. So those same kind of spirits, when they make their transition, they work through these talismans. So a cracker goes up to Nigeria somewhere or Ghana and sits down with one of these fake priests, and the spirit communicates through the talisman and tells them something about their life or tells them how to do something to get some money, and they're like, oh, the deity is really working. And the whites and offspring, of course, know that no real deity is communicating, but they'll go to these spiritualists, pseudo-spiritualists, and they'll come back over here and say, well, the deities are working with us, and you can't be racist because the deities of Africa work with us, and how can you be racist? You're just an African-American who's angry about your position, but the deities of Africa have sanctioned us. And some of our people are so brainwashed, we embrace that nonsense. But it's criminality. No divinity has ever worked with them and ever will. And any priest or priestess who says otherwise is lying. So they're either lying deliberately, which is the smaller percentage, but then you have the larger percentage who are lying not deliberately, but they're still lying. Lying is lying. You're not telling the truth. You're working with spirits that are not divinities, they are not Orisha, they are not Voodoo, and passing those fake divinations off as real, and allowing these criminals to come up into your Ilays and abosom and PA talking about, well, this white Hispanic is our brother and all this other nonsense. Total foolishness. So you're being exposed now. There are many people who are leaving these pseudo-spiritual houses because their Okra has been telling them all along that that's criminality, that embracing the whites and their offspring is criminality, that embracing dissexuality, homosexuality, trying to say that's spiritual and acceptable, that's criminality. The divinities have never accepted dissexuality, homosexuality, and never will. It has nothing to do with the politics of the day have changed, so therefore the forces in nature have changed. They will never change. Just like they will never accept child molestation, they will never accept dissexuality. The whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder. That is their nature, to be engaged in perversity. That's who they are. They've been promoting that ever since they've been in existence in the world for thousands of years. That is them. It has nothing to do with us. And that is them as long as they exist until they become extinct, until we make them extinct. They're never going to change. And we don't have any desire to seek to change them. The only desire we have is to eliminate them. But the abosom will never accept perversity. They are spirits of order, and they only resound order, reflect order, and so forth. Now, let's scroll through some of this information because it's not particular to the specific. Okay, so we'll get to a section to give you an example of what's happening. We say most of these, we talked about requests for divination and so forth. Most who identify as Akan, Yoruba, Eve, Fon, Bakongo, quote-unquote, Kemetic, and other priests or priestesses typically have a Eurocentric orientation and infection, which derails or clouds their divinatory practice. When it comes to embracing and expressing the fullness of Nyame wa Nyame and Sheshe, or divine order, which is composed of Maranechi, divine law, and divine hate. And we've talked about, in our book, Maranechi talks about divine order is comprised of divine law or love and divine hate. The expansive pole of order is the contractive pole of order. The universe is created through law, the expression of order. Law and love is the same word in the real context, not lust that the whites and offspring are talking about. The word law and the word love is the same word. So we're in law, we're in quote-unquote love with an entity, meaning our interaction with that individual or entity is reflective of divine order. Law is the expression of order. Love, quote-unquote, is the expression of order, divine order. So when you have a loveful relationship, you have a lawful relationship, one that expresses divine order. So law is the expression of order that is the expansive pole of order. So the creation comes into being through an expression of order. There's an order that's laid out spiritually, and creation unfolds according to that order. The law that governs, that exudes from that order is the expression of the order. So then you have a creation, but it is sustained through divine hate. So creation comes into being through law, through expression of order. It is sustained through hate, the impression of order. Hate rejects or repels anything that would disturb the order that has been established. So your immune system and lymphatic system destroys anything that would disturb the integrity of the order that regulates your body. So your body comes into being, but is sustained through the immune system and lymphatic system, through divine hate, divine rejection of disorder. Most of these individuals who are priests and priestesses have a Eurocentric orientation. As soon as they hear the word hate, they recoil like slaves. They fear the word hate, even though it actually is not an English word. It comes from our ancient ancestral languages and is part of the name of the divinities, male and female, of hate. But they've been conditioned by the whites and their offspring. That conditioning has infected even the ancestral language on the continent. So Negroes on the continent will tell you hate is wrong, and the Orisha don't accept hate, and that's evil. Pure foolishness, because they've been infected with Islam for the past few hundred years, and then more recently Christianity for the past 100+ years. So they've incorporated that nonsense into the Yoruba tradition, the Akan tradition, the Bambara tradition, Igbo, and the various others. And the same thing over here. So when you have these individuals who call themselves Kemetic, call themselves Akan, Yoruba, Eve, Fon, Bakongo, Igbo, whatever it is, they don't embrace the fullness of divine order, the expansive pole and the contractive pole, the expressive pole, the impressive pole, divine law, divine hate. Because they don't embrace the fullness of divine order, they fall short. Because we have been conditioned against the divinity of hate and thus the deities of hate. Benna and Abena, Erubekudet, Sekmet, Ogun, and Iyami, Abeni, and so forth. This conditioning blocks key components of the messages that an Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit diviner receives from the abosom and Nanasom and Samafo. This conditioning precludes them from recognizing the reality that Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral culture is the expression of the divine acceptance of order through law, love, and divine rejection of disorder through hate. Thus, as soon as such a diviner receives a message from an abosom or nsamai regarding hate, the rejection of disorder and its purveyors, divine immunity, the conditioned diviner seeks to reinterpret that message away from the very divine immunity that would assist the querent and that was actually conveyed to him or her by the abosom or Nsamai. This is why it is difficult to refer our people to a large percentage of purported, quote-unquote, traditional or quote-unquote initiated priests and priestesses. At best, the divinations they administer are hit and miss. They hit on certain issues and circumstances and miss when it counts most. And their misses account for the degradation in the culture and the religion as manifest today through its adherents. Look at the state of ancestral religion on the continent as well as in the Western Hemisphere. If you look at the state of these traditions and the way the people are operating, money that's being charged individuals and people being used for sex and money and power and control and all kinds of nonsense, these are not traditions you want to embrace. Pseudo-philosophy, white pseudo-philosophy being infused into the culture, the whites and their offspring being allowed to, quote-unquote, participate, even though the abosom have nothing to do with that. So when they're allowed to, quote-unquote, participate, the abosom leave the shrine. So the only thing you have left is the brainwashed Negro priest, his followers, and some crackers. But the abosom are gone, and the Nanasom are gone. So they're really not in the culture, even though they came into the building. But people want to get involved in culture, the first thing they're hit with is accepting the whites and their offspring and accepting bisexuality, homosexuality, hit with all these fees and Negroes on power trips and control and all kinds of other nonsense. And then even the ones who are not doing some of that, they have a pseudo-philosophy. When you bring up certain things about divine law, divine hate, shut it down immediately. Say, no, that's not correct. We can't deal with hate, or that's negative emotion and all this other foolishness they've learned from the whites and their offspring, giving you all kinds of misinformation, including monotheism as part of the culture and trying to forge the culture into a monotheistic culture, which it is not, because they're brainwashed by the whites and their offspring, trying to include Jesus and Muhammad and other pseudo-spiritualists, pseudo-characters that never existed into the traditions and say, oh, they were part of the ancient ancestry. You see all kinds of nonsense operating under the guise of ancestral religion on the continent, full of corruption, and here in the Western Hemisphere. That is a result of these pseudo-priests and priestesses and brainwashed priests and priestesses rejecting the fullness of divine order, not embracing divine immunity that will repel disordered thoughts, intentions, actions, and individuals, and allow you to see what's real and what's important, what's true, what's correct, so you can incorporate it. They block themselves from that, and they accept all kinds of individuals, entities, thoughts, intentions, and actions, and cultural peculiarities that destroy the culture and degrade the culture. That's why it's so perverse that most people, when they are confronted with, hey, I want to learn something about the Akan tradition, they go to somebody, connect with somebody, they go to these rituals, see a great deal of nonsense, people drinking alcohol and acting ridiculous, smoking and everything else, and then the people try to pass that off as part of the culture. People engage in perverse sexuality and everything else, and they're trying to pass that off as part of the culture, charging them all kinds of money for no reason, for divinations, and they're saying, well, this is the culture. And people want to have nothing to do with that. They get online and try to Google information about various Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut cultures and are confronted with extraterrestrials and homosexuality and crackers and money and everything else, and they want to have nothing to do with it. The reason why these cultures are degraded in this fashion is because priests and priestesses who are fake, as well as those who were real but are brainwashed, they reject what the abosom are actually saying, and they only interpret messages in a corrupt way when it comes to divine immunity, divine hate, away from the real message. And they create chaos. And then the population of people, if they're brainwashed and embracing white culture, that filters into the practice of the ancestral religion as well. So, and this is why we say later in the document, those who have embraced real culture, they will not seek to incorporate the pseudo-religions and the fictional characters associated with the pseudo-religions. including Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Moorishism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Kabbalism, Hermeticism, Masonry, esotericism, lost landism, the foolishness of Mu and Atlantis and Lemuria and all that kind of nonsense, which is non-existent, extraterrestrialism, Jesus, Yeshua, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Muhammad, Yahweh, Allah, Brahman, Buddha, the Elohim, mythological Hebrews. None of these characters existed at all in any form or of any race. None of these isms, lost landism, esotericism, Kabbalism, Buddhism, that has nothing to do with our culture. Moorishism, that foolishness, nothing to do with our culture. The people who are embracing divine law and divine hate fully, divine order fully, they reject that nonsense. So when they begin to reestablish and recalibrate their practices based on reality, based on aquatic, based on truth, then they reject the whites and their offspring, their culture, and their false religions fully, consistently, perpetually, without compromise. Now, just want to scroll through that piece, and there's one other piece. Now, and we mentioned part of this, the utility of Adebisa was demonstrated through those of our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestors and ancestors who engaged the Adebisa process to spiritually align with and gather information from plant life and mineral life in order to wage chemical and biological warfare against the whites on the plantations, poisoning their food and water supply, creating disease, bacterial and viral infections to use against them, tracking the movements of the whites, and thereby avoiding capture after escaping from plantations and more. Adebisa proved indispensable for planning and implementing successful insurrections and the development and implementation of guerrilla warfare tactics in order to defend our new independent sovereign settlements after having liberated ourselves from plantations. We were also empowered through Adebisa in the planning, timing, and thus implementation of successful raids on the plantations to take supplies, weapons, and tools, kill the white occupants, and free more Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, and lead them back to the independent Akunfo warrioress, or maroon settlements we had established away from the plantation. It was through our consistent waging of war against the whites and their offspring that we forced them to accept the abolition of enslavement. They realized that if they did not accept abolition, the Akunfo war against them would continue to expand and gain momentum, and we would eventually exterminate them all. As descendants of these Akunfo, we are poised to effectively employ Adebisa once again in the ongoing war against the whites and their offspring as we work to establish and defend an independent, sovereign Oman nation upon our own land. Recall when we talked about George Washington Carver learning directly from plant life, mineral life, replicating what he learned directly from those spirits, replicating it in the laboratory to create products that revolutionize agriculture. In the same fashion, we have people who can do that today, males and females, young and old, but not just to create products that will feed individuals and create all kinds of products that will, ease things in our lives, but also communicate with the plant life and mineral life to learn what bacteria can be extracted to wage chemical and biological warfare against the millions of our enemies. So we use it for both processes. We have a precedent that was set by our ancestors and ancestors. That was a major weapon we used against the whites and their offspring during enslavement to free ourselves from enslavement. Where you can have everybody in the plantation owner's house come down with a violent disease, and they're convulsing and coughing and bleeding and so forth, and then you can massacre all of them, get the guns and so forth, free the people from the plantation and get to the maroon settlement, or you can use Adebisa to plan for raids and know when it's time to raid, when it's time to, hold back from a raid, when is the best time to plan an insurrection, when is the best time not to. But specifically dealing with the chemical and biological warfare, that's something we used in the past, and that's something we use to defend ourselves today. Whatever we need to use to defend ourselves from our enemies, that's what we use, and that's natural, that's in harmony with divine order. We have a precedent set by our people for that. This is the offensive use of Adebisa or divination. Okay, so there's just one other piece. There's an article that we published. Abosom do not ask for money. And it's not a long article, and it's very straightforward and self-explanatory. And you can get that directly from our website, from the Adebisa page. Another page is on the website as well. But the key point in the article, and we go into some detail in the article, but the key point is this. The abosom do not require money in order to spiritually possess one of their children on Asase Afur, the Earth Mother. It is part of the Nkra and Nkrabeya, the divine function of the abosom, to execute possession on a periodic basis. The abosom obey Nyame wa Nyame, Amenet Amen, the great mother, the great father, supreme being, and do not make decisions about who they will heal based on how much currency the individual can produce. Priesthood is not a business, and the abosom, Orisha, Vodou do not treat it as such. They never have, and they never will. Those who have embraced and perpetuate a centuries-old corruption of the culture are not serving the abosom. A revelation of this reality is the condition of the people on the continent who, quote-unquote, practice ancestral religion in such fashion, as well as the condition of the, quote-unquote, practice of ancestral religion outside the continent. Perverse philosophies, acceptance of dissexuality, homosexuality, acceptance of non-Afurakanu, non-Afuraitkaitnut, and more. These are all symptoms of the withdrawing of the abosom from influencing the ritual practices of such a quote-unquote priest or priestesshood. So what we talk about in this article, we go into some truthstory showing that a few hundred years ago, specifically with the people who embraced some aspects of the pseudo-religion of Islam, hundreds of years ago, we've been interfacing with the brainwashed Negroes who embraced Mohammedanism over 1,000 years ago, because they wanted to wage war against other groups in the family, and they weren't strong enough to take down other groups in society, so they aligned with the outside enemy who was coming in and tried to ally their forces to take down those in the society they wanted to take down, the rulers they wanted to take down, and so forth. And they allied with these white Arabs as well as Negroes, and of course they could not practice traditional religion because the abosom weren't participating in that. So the only kind of pseudo-spirituality they could engage in is through the use of discarnate wayward spirits associated with talismans, shrines, amulets, and so forth. So there was this proliferation of lower-level, quote-unquote, witchcraft utilizing wayward spirits through talismans, pseudo-shrines, amulets for hundreds of years. Then they set up little shrines and shrine houses with these individuals, these little talismans, these spirits, and people will come to them if they want something done, and they will ask for payment, ask for money or whatever. There's an exchange, and then the person will send that little spirit to go do whatever. This talisman economy that developed as a result of people moving away from the traditional religion became standard in certain areas, and now some people have incorporated that as part of traditional culture. And you think that going to a shrine and giving hundreds of dollars to get a divination or a spirit possessing, talking about, I need this much money, a so-called abosom, a so-called orisha possessing, saying this, you need to give this much money or else you're going to die, you're going to get sick, and all this other kind of nonsense. This has become standard in various places on the continent because some of our people incorporated the foolishness of pseudo-religion. And the only kind of spiritual work or pseudo-spiritual work they could engage in is working with this kind of wayward spirit. So that has come to the present. And you have many people on the continent still engaged in that nonsense now. People travel to the continent today. They go to some shrine. The pseudo-spirit will possess and say, I need this money. You don't give me this money, you're going to die. You're not going to be able to get the medicine. If you don't have the money, they'll say, the spirit is possessed now. They'll say, well, how much do you have on your credit card? The spirit is asking you how much is in your bank account. How much is on your credit card? Send it here. And Negroes are giving hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, paying these individuals to do little pseudo work by a little crackhead spirit, or getting initiation. and binding themselves to these wayward criminal little spirits. Or that same kind of practice is moved here because we learned that from individuals on the continent there. We bring that same kind of practice here. And we come up with a great deal of pseudo-philosophies about money is currency and currency is energy. And when you're giving the money, you're really giving an energy to the abosom. That's all foolish. The abosom have never asked for cash, money transactions, or anything else like that. They don't require that as part of their Nkrabia, their Nkra, to possess and communicate with our people. That's wired within them before the white Nile Spring existed, before money, paper money existed, before these exchanges existed, the abosom are the abosom. If you are assigned to them pre-incarnation, they're going to possess you because that's their function. You're aligned with them. They're connected to a specific community, governing a specific clan. They're going to possess people in the clan and communicate with people in the clan. When you're dealing with offerings of plant life, animal life, mineral life in a certain capacity, different things than somebody saying, hey, you need $700, you need $1,000, you need $500, or else you're going to give me, you're going to do whatever. That has nothing to do with spirituality. That has nothing to do with anything. You don't need to deal with any of that. That has nothing, no basis in reality. The abosom do not ask for money, never have and never will. The Orisha, the Vodou, Ntoru, Ntorotu, never have, never will. Now, just want to make sure we didn't miss anything else in the chat room. All right, so it's 11:30, so we can end the broadcast here. You can look at the links on the Adebisa page for detailed information about what we've been going over, including the link to the article, The Abosom Do Not Ask for Money. Also, the related article, Amani Hunu, Overcoming Transcarnational Suffering. We did a broadcast on that, but that's related as well. It has to do with divination, has to do with what happens when people suffer and so forth. Do you bring some of that suffering from a previous incarnation if you were engaged in certain kinds of behavior? It's like you have an open wound. If you cut yourself and the wound is open, if you don't do something to cover the wound, it can get infected. If you engage in disorder behavior and open a wound in your spirit body and you don't close the wound, it can become infected. You draw bacteria that you should be repelling. If you reincarnate and come back into the world and you never close that wound, you'll still be drawing that kind of bacteria, negative individuals, entities to you because you were never healed. There was never any closure of that wound. So people come in contact with all kinds of negative situations from the time they're children and older. People in the community are embracing pseudo-cultures, can't figure out what's wrong. They're taking people to different spiritualists or psychiatrists or medical doctors or whatever it is because they can't figure out what's going on with this individual or why they keep coming in contact with negative spiritual entities because they don't, as a community, haven't established a structure to identify these things at birth and potential and mitigate them before they take place because we've embraced white culture. On the other hand, sometimes the individual has brought some of this disorder into the world with them because every person that is born into the world is a returning ancestral spirit, sometimes based on things we have done in the past, whether it was out of ignorance and immaturity or out of criminality. We bring that magnet for negative entities into this next incarnation. So how do we mitigate that? How do we overcome that? Overcoming transcarnational suffering. We deal with that in that article. So you can connect on that as well because that is directly related to divination because those things come up with regard to Adebisa in divination sessions. When people are trying to figure out what's going on, it seems like there's a quote-unquote curse on the family. All the women in the family are suffering in a certain capacity, in a certain way, or the men in the family are dying at a certain age or before a certain age. Something is happening. What's going on with the Unsamampo in this family? What's going on with the family dynamic? And once those things are addressed, then things can be, leveled out. They can be smoothed out. Things can be returned to order. Balance can be restored. So that article is there as well. Amani Hunu, Overcoming Transcarnational Suffering. And we did a broadcast on that, and it's one of the archives. So But again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in. We will be back on tomorrow for Ekwa Marketplace. Please go to our home economic development page on our website, ojirafo.com. We are targeting one business per week for the next 52 weeks. We are in our third week. Wahimi Mmusuo Productions is the business of this week. So when you go on the home page on our website, you will see that information. Click on the link to the website and support Wahimi Mmusuo Productions, owned by Dr. Adwa. And we will be discussing more of that and have individuals on tomorrow talking about businesses, organizations, institutions that are serving the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut community and sharing our ancestral values at the same time. So look for that notification. Follow us on YouTube, Ojirafo on YouTube, Ojirafo on Twitter, Afuraka on Instagram, and Afuraka.Afuraitkaitnut on Facebook. And follow us and subscribe to us on these different platforms, and then you'll receive automatic updates on everything. We're also on Google Plus as Ojirafo, so you can follow us there as well. Join one of our circles. Include us in your circles as well. And again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again. That's up.